vegetables some in the fall, and they'd, put up a lot of vegetables. And he had a cow, and like I say, he was really a veterinarian without a license.
Oh.
And back then you didn't have to be a veterinarian with a license.
Mm-hmm.
And he called it his dog money. People would pay him, they'd bring their dogs over, if they were sick, and for him to dip them and take care of them and breed them and all that kind of stuff. And they'd pay him for it. And he'd go, when the cows had a new calf, they'd come get him to take care of the cow. I don't know what he had to do. I know he carried some kind of gloves with him and some kind of disinfectant. So I don't know what he had to do with the cows after they had a new calf. And I know he had to put something kind of like tar over them from the flies would lay on the cow, and called magnets. Mm-hmm. And that's the reason he put all that stuff on them. Back then, I don't know what to do now. But anyway, that's what he called it his dog money.
Wow.
That was in the later ages. And before that, he was a county agent. And back then, they didn't have to have a license to be a county agent. So when they had to have a license, then he couldn't be the county agent anymore. Mm-hmm. And I may have told you, when he was a county agent, he went to a little house we had in our backyard. We call it a potato house. He went up to Ohio or somewhere up north to learn how to keep potatoes, Mm-hmm. I can't think of the word. Preserve them.
Preserve, okay.
The sweet potatoes. And that house out there is all insulated.
Okay. That's good, because I was just going to ask, how do you, if you didn't have money back then, it gets cold, really cold during the winter season. How did you manage the cold?
We had a little fire in that big bedroom where we stayed all the time. Mm-hmm. That's where we lived mostly in the wintertime, in that little room. And we had coal. And my uncle that had a lumber yard and an ice plant and the coal, mm-hmm. He sold coal. Well, and too, that's where we got the coal from him. But my father, in the wintertime, he went to Florida with the dogs. He for a few years, he trained bird dogs from some rich man up in Ohio, and he'd take those dogs to Florida to the clubhouse, and this man would come down there, and my father stayed about 2 months in Florida every winter. And that left my mother taking care of all the children. Mm-hmm. And for food, I remember one time we was reading a letter where she wrote to him, she said she didn't have enough money to buy a stamp. And back then, the stamps didn't cost but a penny.
Oh, yeah.
And she'd order her food from this grocery store in town, and they sent it, what she needed, because she didn't get very much, and charge it. Mm-hmm. And when he came back home, when he came back, he'd bring us lots of oranges and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I remember he brought a big old long thing, about that long, of bananas, and hung it up on the back porch, and every time we wanted a banana, we'd go out there and get it off that.
Oh my goodness, that is the sweetest.
Anyway,
wow.
Back then, people charged their groceries, and before he died, he had got what he called his dog money. Back then, that was all. He's getting a little dog money. My oldest brother took care of the bills at the house.
Is that the house in Thomaston?
Huh?
Is that the house in Thomaston, the one on Howell Street?
No.
Is that the house?
That's the house,
okay. Wow.
and my brother worked at the mill there, and he paid. They had to mortgage the house. When he bought some land for a big farm, and of course he didn't have the money to pay for it. And he mortgaged the house that we all grew up in Thomaston, and of course the banker there was just taking everybody's houses and lands because they couldn't pay for it. And the banker got rich, but anyway, my brother paid the mortgage each month, so until they paid it off. So that was how they kept the house.
Oh,
And,
wow. So your
and I was fixing to tell you about him owning that store that went out of business a long time before. He took his dog money and he went to the store owner's grandchildren and paid them the money he owed me.
Wow.
That he wasn't able to pay back then.
Wow, really?
He didn't want to die owing anything.
Yes.
Anybody. That's always kind of touched me that he even the grandchildren he paid what he owed that store. It was called Hannah and Chatfield.
Wow.
And I remember sometimes we'd have a penny maybe, and we'd go to that store and they had a big old jar of cookies. The best. I thought they were so good.
Cookies.
We'd get a cookie for a penny.
Oh my goodness.
And
Grandma, I'm fascinated. I'm so amazed with all your stories. I just love it. I just love listening to you.
And I had my mother was real smart, real smart. She knew Latin coming and going, and we all took Latin when we were in high school, and that was hard. And my friend that lived right down the street from us, we walked to school every morning, and every afternoon she'd come over to my house, and Mama would help us with our Latin. Oh, and her daddy was a clerk at a store that sold shoes and clothes, all for children. And he carried me to town one time. With her and bought me an ice cream, and I thought that was the most wonderful thing I'd ever had. It was a nickel, and you'd buy an ice cream. One of those children said one time, we never did know where our next meal was coming from.
One of the children in your neighborhood
would come over there to play.
To play with you? Oh.
To play with the boys, yeah. I had 4 boys younger than me. And we call them the 4 little, everybody call them the 4 little Nelson boys.
Oh.
Yeah, they'd go.
So there's 7 of you, 7 kids?
Huh?
You have 6 siblings, right?
There were 10 children.
Oh, 10.
Yeah. My oldest sister had already gone home. My father, when he married, he built that house in Thomaston, and he had 2 children, and his wife was washing the windows and getting ready to move in and everything, and she got pneumonia and died. And that left him with 2 small children, and he remarried within a year.
And that's your mother?
Yeah. And she had 8 children.
So 10
yeah.
children.
And
do you know what is your dad's origin? I mean, do you know what your dad's the Nelson,
came through England.
England. The Nelsons. Okay. Came through England, huh? Okay.
Yeah. And
what about
my mother's family? They were Worshams. I don't know.
Worshams?
Worsham, W-O-R-S-H-A-M.
Worshams, okay.
Yeah. And they were, most of them were teachers. There was a whole bunch of those. And my 2 uncles were teachers. One of them was taught at chemistry at the Hunter College in New York, which was a girls' college.
Mm-hmm.
He taught chemistry there at that college. And another uncle was principal of a high school in South Georgia somewhere. And my mother, when she finished college, she went to teach school at that with him. And she ended up teaching in a little one-room schoolhouse close to where she lived.
Mm-hmm.
And taught all grades in that one little room.
Oh.
She was a smart. They made excellent grades in school, and they got scholarships to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
And
Rose and Ray.
And help pay their way. And then
you didn't pay anything for their college
I didn't have
tuition.
No, I didn't have a thing. I didn't give them one penny for college. I didn't have anything.
What?
And like I say, they had scholarships.
Mm-hmm.
And Lucille let Rose, when Rose finished high school, she and Lillian lived in Atlanta, and Lucille took Rose every summer and got her a job
in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm. And I think Rose had a job when she went to college too. The government would give you 2 hours. You could work 2 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Rose had that. Ray had it, and Ray also, when he was going to college, finish college, he worked for the IRS, and
like an internship.
They gave him a job.
Oh, I see.
While he was going to school. That paid him. You knew Ray had cancer, didn't you? Or
no.
Did you? When he was a senior in college, he had cancer in his chest. It was just all over his chest. He came home. He called me up and said that he'd had some X-rays made, and he needed to see a cancer doctor for me to get him an appointment in Thomaston to see a doctor so he could get him appointed in Atlanta at Emory University.
Yes.
You heard of Emory University?
Yes, Emory.
So he came home, and I carried him to that doctor, and he got him and he went to Atlanta, and they had the surgery, and they removed a lot of the cancer, but they didn't get it all, and they wanted to give him chemotherapy. And my first cousin, Alvin Nelson, was an oncologist in Little Rock, Arkansas, and he consulted with the doctors at Emory about this particular type of cancer, and he told me he didn't need chemotherapy. All he needed was that radiation.
Oh,
so
wow.
They did radiation, and Lucille and Lillian carried him to. He came back to Thomas and stayed with us while he was taking radiation. Lucille and Lillian carried him to Atlanta every day for his treatment for a whole month. Oh. And the type of cancer he had, the doctor said, if he had cancer, that was the best type to have.
Okay, it's benign.
And this radiation, cause it was all over his arteries, and it ran his lungs and the big arteries, and I think it damaged one lobe of the bottom lobe of one lung. I think it was, and around the big arteries.